Hi, this is Christopher Dragon, Music Director of your Wyoming Symphony Orchestra. We welcome you to the new year with Handel and Brahms, music by two significant composers which we have yet to explore together. The first half of the program is with music by the Baroque composer Georg Friedrich Handel. Born in Germany in 1685, however lived most of his life in England. Handel moved to the UK because he saw an opportunity. As an opera composer, England of all the European countries was the least exploited, and so as a result wrote dozens of operas there. Occasionally, Handel wrote dramatic works in English called oratorios. Basically, an opera without costumes and scenery, where a story is sung to the audience. These appealed to a broader British base, including the middle class, because they had biblical subjects and were often in a language they spoke. The most famous example of this being Handel's Messiah. It is from this form of composition where we find our opening piece on the program. The arrival or entrance of the Queen of Sheba is from his oratorio, Solomon, and opens the third act of this work. This is not the title that Handel himself gave to the Symphonia, but it makes a lot of sense given that the third act depicts the visit of the Queen of Sheba, and as you hear in the music, is full of pomp and excitement. We continue in the realm of Handel with another one of his most popular orchestral works, his Water Music. It has this interesting title as it was composed at the request of King George I as entertainment for his lavish royal cruise. Basically, it was a concert on the water. The king and some of his other aristocrat friends were on the leisurely boat on the River Thames with a second barge with about 50 musicians performing the music during the voyage. Given that it was composed as entertainment, it is a suite of highly spirited movements in dance form, which was very normal during that period. The king was so delighted with this new work that he asked to hear it over and over for a total of 4 performances lasting about an hour apiece. Don't worry, the version we are performing for you isn't that long and only consists of 6 movements. I should also note that we are performing a modern orchestration by Sir Hamilton Hardy, which includes clarinets, an instrument that didn't really gain acceptance until the end of the 18th century. Here are just a few snippets of Handel's Water Music to dip your toes in. The first movement opens with exuberance and excitement with a call and answer idea set between the different instrument groups. You can clearly hear it was composed as royal entertainment. The second movement is an air, basically meaning an aria or a song-like composition, something like a ballad today. Even though it's one of the more relaxed movements of the suite, it still carries that sunny disposition as the swaying melody is heard throughout the parts. The version we are performing for you today ends with perhaps the most popular movement of the entire Water Music. Again, using that call and response with a prominent use of brass instruments, making it suitable for outdoor performance. piece on the program is by one of my favorite composers, Johannes Brahms, a German born in 1833 who was a one-of-a-kind key composer of the Romantic era. Unlike some of the other composers at the time that were composing tone poems or music that told a narrative, Johannes Brahms was instead a traditionalist, taking classical and Baroque musical forms like sonata form and fugues, and using these rules of structure to explore new harmonies. Now, there was a lot of pressure placed on him, as early on in his career, Brahms was perceived to be the savior of German music and the next great composer to follow Beethoven. This very much loomed over him, which is evidence from his Symphony No. 1 that took him about 21 years to compose, of which he finally presented at the age of 43. For his second piano concerto, however, Brahms was at a very different place in his life. He was one of the most famous composers in Europe, a confident composer sure of his place in music history. So it probably comes to no surprise that the concerto was an immediate triumph. It is a mammoth work and has been often described as a symphony with a piano soloist, basically meaning that the soloist and orchestra have equal importance. Unlike most concertos, which consist of 3 movements, this concerto has 4, another reason why it feels more like a symphony. As expected, the first movement is the most substantial. A simple main theme is introduced by a marvelous horn call from the distance that seems to gather all the instruments, with the piano responding to its graceful melody with its own, before launching into a cadenza that announces the virtuoso nature of the movement. This from the very beginning highlights the main idea of this movement, with it building in drama and virtuosity. However, Brahms never lets it get out of control, always bringing it back to that sweetness and tenderness. Brahms described the second movement to one of his friends as a tiny scherzo. As you will hear, it is anything but that. The piano bursts in furiously impatient, with a stormy accompaniment by the orchestra. The contrasting second melody takes all that bluster out and is instead calm and lyrical. As you will hear throughout this movement, this second melody returns in various guises, but that bluster and furious nature is never far behind. There is also a contrasting trio section which was standard in the structure of the time, in this case sounding like a charming, courtly dance. Next is the slow movement of the concerto and features one of the most sublime cello solos ever composed. It also highlights one of Brahms' abilities to write seamless, never-ending melodies. Brahms really knew how to pull at those heartstrings. The last movement begins at a nice leisurely pace and can only really be described as pure charm and charisma. As expected, it does pick up the pace to build excitement for the conclusion of this monumental work. Joining us for this concerto is my good friend and Casper favorite, Stephen Lim. Having him here is always a special event, so for anyone that has seen Stephen before knows that this is a concert not to be missed. And with that, we hope you enjoy the Wyoming Symphony Orchestra's Handel and Brahms.